What's going on, everyone? It's Mr. West. I hope we're all well. So welcome to another camera test, this time a video test in low light for the OnePlus 6T. So I'm not expecting a huge amount of difference from the OnePlus 6, but given that we didn't do a video test for the OnePlus 6 in low light, let's make up for lost time with the OnePlus 6T. So the front-facing camera on the OnePlus 6T uses a 16 megapixel unit, it's fixed focus, and it has Auto-HDR, and also has gyro-assisted electronic image stabilization. Now, OnePlus handsets have long had a really good reputation for great electronic image stabilization, and I'm expecting this to be no exception. Now, we're currently recording in 720p, so the crop is a little bit closer than what I'm used to. But the first thing I've noticed, just looking through the viewfinder, is the exposure. If you just look here, see these chimneys on top of these cottages. Now, albeit I have been using phones in a slightly lower price range with smaller sensors, but still, the exposure really is commendable. Fair play. Now, we're not going to spend too long in this mode, but I just wanted to start off in the lowest resolution, as you may want to use this just to save on your internal storage. Okay, so switching things up to 1080p now at 30 frames per second from the front-facing camera. Now, you should be getting the benefit of the slightly better detail in this mode, and just look at the exposure on my face from the street lamp. It's really, really clear. It does let in a lot of light, this front-facing sensor, which is really impressive. Now, we're just going to go into some really low light. So even going into a much darker light, just to show you there are no street lights around now. And we can even see, or just about make out, the branches on the trees there from the front-facing camera. So again, that is very, very impressive considering this is a front-facing camera. Cool. So let's just check up behind us to look for detail. I mean, it's really colour accurate, the cottage behind us, and even those brown UPVC windows just behind me there look really colour accurate as well. So we'll check out lens flare from the front-facing camera. And that isn't too bad at all. We've got a little bit of white out in the lens there, which is expected, but that's really not bad. Cool. So let's just try a little run from the front-facing camera and test out the image stabilization. You let me know what you think. One thing I have noticed is this grass behind me is a little bit oversaturated from the front-facing camera. Now, OnePlus are well known for pushing out lots of software updates for their cameras. Now, I'm assuming that this uses the final software build from the OnePlus 6 on this camera software, so I'm hoping that the result looks pretty good. Okay, so starting off in the lowest resolution from the rear camera, and again, you might want to use this to save some space on your internal storage. This is 720p at 30 frames per second. And once again, this uses OnePlus's gyro-assisted electronic image stabilization. I'll just check for lens flare. Pretty good, kind of blotching out the light there. And we'll check out for detail into the distance. We can't really make out a huge amount. It's not particularly dark, there is some cloud cover. You can just about make that out, literally just about, but not crazy. Now, in this mode you can use time to zoom, which is digital. And we'll just test out the image stabilizer using time to zoom. Now, when actually using the phone, the viewfinder does look like it's shaking around, but the software will straighten things out later on in processing. So we'll just go back. So we're back now to standard angle, and the auto exposure there picking out the wall just ahead of us, but not resolving any detail from the houses, which I can see with my naked eye. Okay, so moving up to a slightly high resolution, which is 1080p at 30 frames per second. And again, this uses gyro-assisted electronic image stabilization. Now, just so you're aware, All 30 FPS modes use electronic stabilization, whereas the 60 FPS modes use optical image stabilization. So that's just something to be aware of. And I'm not sure if OnePlus are going to push out an update which allows for electronic stabilization, very much like what Samsung do with the Galaxy Note 9 and Apple with the iPhone XS and XS Max and XR. Right, so let's just pick out these fairy lights on that cottage, and again the exposure is really great. Even picking out the security light just off to the left of the image here on the garage. So once again, looking good. Again, we can see the headlights of the bus there just showing those ghosting images on the lenses, the two green dots you can just see off to the top right of the image there. And can we see any further detail in 1080p? Not just about right in the center of the image, you can just about make the cloud out, but auto exposure doing a good job of the fence there in front of us. Okay, so you'll see a noticeable drop in the exposure. This is because we're recording now at 1080p at 60 frames per second. Now, as I just mentioned, we're now swapping from electronic to optical stabilization. And to temper the lower exposure, we can push on the screen and we can increase the brightness. It doesn't make a huge amount of difference. So we'll just go back to standard. We should be getting the benefit of the slightly smoother movement, albeit with a little bit more shaking due to the optical stabilizer being employed here rather than the electronic stabilization in software. So we'll just check out ×2 zoom and carry on walking. Now it's strange, when you're using optical stabilization, obviously you're seeing the benefit of that in the viewfinder, but when played back, the footsteps may be a little bit choppier rather than smooth. So still in ×2 zoom mode. And we can pick out the lights there and just a little bit of detail into the darkness in the car park there. So we'll just go back to standard. Now obviously if you're going to be using this in vlogs or have you can increase the exposure in post-processing, but the idea of these videos is to show you warts and all how the OnePlus cameras perform in normal conditions. Okay, so moving up to 4K at 30 frames per second from the rear-facing camera. Now the rear-facing camera uses two sensors. The main sensor is a 16 megapixel camera sensor, uses phase detection autofocus. It also has Auto-HDR and also the gyro-assisted EIS, which I mentioned earlier on. Now the secondary sensor is used for depth effects and also the digital ×2 zoom, which we've just switched to now. Now with the high resolution, I'm just going to check and see if there's any improvement in the street lighting. So we'll just check that out now. Not really, we're still getting the lens flare. The lens flare does look quite cool, you can see there. But we're still getting a lot of blowout on the light. So, how much detail can we see? Now the auto exposure does do a really good job. So we can see pretty much most of the way down the street here. But again, the grass is a little oversaturated. It's very dark green rather than the off green that we're getting in this autumn weather. And this house here, we can just about make that out. So we've got some light here. Let's check out autofocus. And very much like the OnePlus 6, really fast to focus, and it's nice and smooth as well. There's no jolt from the autofocus module. Now we can get pretty close as well. So from one T model to another. Okay, so this is 4K at 60 frames per second. And just like 1080p at 60, the exposure is a lot lower. Double the frame rate means the exposure is lowered. So we'll just try out the image stabilization with the optical module engaged at 4K 60 and see how that looks. So let's try times to zoom at 4K 60. So you let me know what you think of the image stabilization and the overall image quality in this mode. Okay, so recorded now at 4K at 60 frames per second. A slightly different route from the normal tunnel because that's been closed for maintenance this evening. So I thought I'd try a slightly more built up area. Lots of houses, trees, and other moving traffic as well. And we'll see how the OnePlus 6T copes with that and see if there's any drop frames in the video. And also we'll test out the audio as well with the stereo microphone recording. So that's the end of the OnePlus 6T low light video test. Slightly mixed bag, especially when changing to 60 FPS modes. However, you let me know what you think of the overall quality of the video. Leave me a comment in the comment section and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. So if you're new around here, please consider subscribing to help support my channel. And also make sure that you don't miss any more video tests coming soon. There will be a daylight video test with the OnePlus 6T and you can see how it fares in better lighting conditions. But for now, thanks very much for watching, guys. My name is Mr. West and I'll catch you guys later.